Okay, so welcome to another deep dive. This time into a job that's probably a lot more important than a lot of people realize.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about enumerators.
Yeah.
And you were kind enough to share some material from Kaplan.
Yeah.
And this is basically like a set of common interview questions for this position so we can really dig in and see
Right.
what an enumerator actually does on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly.
What are the challenges they face? What are the skills they need to succeed?
Yeah. Really get a feel for it.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in. So this first question that somebody interviewing for this role might encounter is, can you tell us about your experience as an enumerator? And the example answer
Okay.
mentions experience across various projects collecting data and information from a variety of sources.
Right.
Okay, so it also lists familiarity with different data collection methods like surveys, in-person interviews,
Right.
online data gathering, and of course being comfortable using whatever software or tools they need. So when you see that broad range of experience just in that one answer, what's the first thing that jumps out at you?
I mean, the first thing for me is, wow, this job requires you to be really adaptable.
Yeah.
Various projects
Hmm.
isn't just a bullet point. It really means that somebody in this role
Right.
needs to be comfortable switching gears. And that could be happening all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 month they're collecting feedback on, the newest iPhone.
Yeah.
And the next month they're, going door to door
Right.
to gather information about, community health or something. So it's like
Right.
they have to constantly be exposed to different data sets and different methodologies,
Yeah.
which probably helps them develop just this really agile and resourceful mindset.
Right.
And they probably get really good at understanding new information and being able to adjust their approach.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of job.
Definitely not.
So when they mention different data collection methods like surveys, in-person interviews, online forms, can you kind of paint a picture of what each of those might look like in practice?
Yeah, sure. I mean, survey administration, that could be anything from conducting phone interviews,
Right. Yeah.
very carefully reading out the questions, recording the responses, or it could be going out and actually
Yeah.
distributing paper questionnaires and then collecting them.
Right.
In-person interviewing,
Yeah.
that's really where those good interpersonal skills come in.
Yeah.
You got to be able to put people at ease,
Yeah.
explain clearly why you're there and what the data is for,
Mm.
and, be able to deal with all kinds of different personalities and communication styles.
Right.
And then online data gathering,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that involves using different, digital platforms,
Yeah.
making sure the participants can easily access and understand the online forms.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the whole element of data security in the digital world.
Yeah. It's a whole other layer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when they mention necessary software and tools,
Yeah.
are we thinking about sophisticated spreadsheets, or is there even more specialized software involved?
It could be both, right?
Okay.
At the most basic level, it could be something like Excel or Google Sheets just to organize the data.
Right.
But then you also have dedicated survey platforms out there
Yeah.
that help you design and distribute questionnaires and collect responses digitally.
Right.
For in-person data collection, there might be apps used on tablets to record information.
Right.
So yeah, you definitely need to be comfortable with a certain level of digital tools.
Okay, so the second interview question kind of gets into problem solving a little bit. It says, can you give an example of a particularly challenging data collection project you have worked on and how you overcame any obstacles?
Okay.
The example they give is really interesting. It's about this remote community that was initially hesitant to participate.
Right.
And the way the enumerator solved this problem was by making repeated visits and working with community leaders.
Interesting.
So what stands out to you in that scenario?
I think it really shows that data collection isn't just this mechanical process.
Yeah.
It's really about people.
Right.
Building trust and rapport is super important,
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with, communities that might be a little wary or just not really into the idea of participating.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that repeated visits were necessary shows that you need perseverance and commitment.
Yeah.
And then working with community leaders.
Right.
I mean, that shows you really have to understand the local dynamics
Right.
and how to get buy-in from the people that the community actually trusts.
Yeah. It's almost like you can have the best design survey in the world,
Right.
but if you can't connect with the people you need information from,
It's useless.
it's useless.
Yeah.
It's not going to be useful.
So it seems like those soft skills, being patient,
Absolutely.
empathetic, a good communicator, those are just as important as knowing how to use the tools.
Yeah.
100%. I think even more so.
And when you think about the bigger picture, this challenge kind of speaks to the idea of making sure you get representative data.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because if certain communities are really hard to reach or they just don't want to participate,
Right.
then the data you collect might not actually reflect the whole population.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be skewed.
Yeah, so an effective enumerator needs to be able to get past those hurdles to make sure the information is complete and unbiased.
Absolutely. I think that's key.
Okay, let's move on to data quality. This is obviously crucial.
Yeah.
The third question asks, how do you ensure the accuracy and reliability of the data you collect?
Okay.
The example answer emphasizes following established protocols,
Okay.
using standardized instruments and trained interviewers,
Hmm.
and then regularly checking the data by verifying responses against some kind of guidelines.
Right.
So why are each of those elements so important for getting good data?
Okay, so standardized instruments, those are really the foundation.
It's like if you're measuring something, you want to make sure you're using a tool that's properly calibrated.
Right.
So if everybody is using the same exact questions, worded exactly the same way,
Okay.
then you know you're collecting comparable information from all the participants.
Yeah.
If the questions are different or they're open to interpretation, then it's like you're trying to compare apples and oranges.
Yeah, totally.
And then well-trained interviewers are super important too, because they know exactly how to administer those instruments, how to ask follow-up questions in a neutral way
Right.
without leading the person you know,
Right.
and how to just minimize any unintentional bias that they might introduce.
It's about taking the human element out of it as much as possible.
Exactly, as much as you can.
Okay, so it's about having this consistent, controlled process to reduce those errors.
Exactly.
And then there's the idea of quality checks, verifying responses against predefined criteria. So what does that actually look like when someone is reviewing the collected data? Okay, so let's say a survey asks for someone's age.
Okay.
And you see an entry that says 150.
Yeah.
That's obviously an error.
Right.
Based on, reasonable human lifespan.
Right.
Or if certain answers should logically connect.
Okay.
Like let's say someone says they've never owned a car, but then they answer questions about their commute by car.
Right.
You're like, wait a minute, these two things don't go together.
Yeah, that's a red flag.
Though it's about having that system in place to catch those illogical or impossible answers before the data is, finalized.
Right. So for you, the listener who values trustworthy information,
Yes.
this means that the quality of the data is not a given.
Right.
It has to be actively built in through careful planning and these checks
All the way through.
throughout the whole process.
Yeah, the whole process.
And that's really what gives credibility to any conclusions that are drawn from the data.
Exactly. Without that, it's kind of meaningless.
Okay, the next question shifts our focus to teamwork. It asks, can you tell us about your experience working with a team in collecting data?
Okay.
The example answer mentions experience in both leading and being part of a team. And it emphasizes things like effective communication,
Right.
collaboration, delegating tasks, coordinating logistics.
All important stuff.
So how do those different team roles and skills actually play out in data collection?
A lot of large-scale data collection projects.
Yeah.
You're going to have teams of enumerators working together to cover a wider area or reach more people. So in a leadership role, an enumerator might be responsible for training new team members.
Okay.
Assigning specific areas or quotas for data collection.
Right.
And just making sure everybody's following the rules.
Yeah.
As a team member, the focus is on, hitting your goals, keeping your colleagues in the loop.
Right.
Letting them know about any problems you're running into.
Yeah.
And just supporting each other to meet deadlines.
Yeah.
And maintain data quality.
And it's interesting that they specifically mentioned experience in both leader and member roles. It suggests that being adaptable and capable in different team situations is really valuable.
Oh, yeah.
You got to be able to take charge when you need to,
Yeah.
but also work well as part of a team.
For sure. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly. And data collection can be pretty complicated, right?
Yeah.
You're scheduling interviews, you're managing equipment, you're dealing with unexpected issues.
Things pop up.
Yeah, things pop up all the time. So clear communication
Yep.
and being organized are super important.
100%.
Okay, question 5 dives into data management and analysis.
Okay.
And the example answer talks about cleaning coding, entering data into databases, being familiar with data analysis software, and doing basic statistical analysis like frequencies and cross-tabulation.
Right.
So it might surprise some people that a data collection role
Hmm.
also involves this analytical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, because the role of an enumerator often goes beyond just gathering the information.
Right.
There's also this expectation that they can organize it and make sense of it.
Right.
So data cleaning that involves identifying and correcting errors.
Okay.
Coding refers to categorizing responses,
Mm.
especially for open-ended questions,
Right.
so that they're easier to analyze.
Mm-hmm.
And then doing those basic statistical analyses like calculating how often a particular answer comes up
Yeah.
or looking at how two different variables relate to each other,
Right.
that can give you some really valuable initial insights.
Yeah, so even if they're not a full-blown data scientist,
Right.
having these skills makes them a more well-rounded contributor
Oh, for sure.
to the whole research process. And they also mention being able to present data clearly,
Yeah.
which implies that, communicating those findings even at a basic level
Mm-hmm.
is part of the job.
Yeah, it's all about connecting those dots.
Yeah. Okay, finally, the last interview question focuses on what happens to the information after it's collected. It
Yep.
says, can you tell us about your experience with privacy and confidentiality when collecting data?
Important stuff.
Yeah, the answer emphasizes informing participants how their data will be used,
Right.
getting their consent,
Yeah.
and making sure the data is stored securely.
Hmm.
And all of that is in line with whatever regulations are out there.
Right.
This feels especially important nowadays with all the digital stuff going on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, handling data responsibly and ethically is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Informing participants about why you're collecting the data and how it's going to be used.
Right.
That's basic,
Right.
That's how you build trust and make sure everything's transparent.
Right.
Informed consent means that people are choosing to participate and they understand what they're agreeing to.
Yeah.
And then with all the concerns about data security and privacy these days,
Mm-hmm.
you have to make sure the data is stored securely and follows all the rules to protect people's privacy and, maintain the integrity of the whole process.
So it really highlights the responsibility that comes with this job.
Big time.
Enumerators are dealing with personal information, sometimes sensitive information.
Yeah.
So they have a duty to handle that with care
Absolutely.
and maintain that trust with the participants.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, before we wrap up, the Kaplan materials also give a list of related job titles. Admissions advisor, canvasser, census clerk, and census taker.
Right.
So looking at that list, what are the common threads you see connecting all those different roles?
Well, the most obvious one is information gathering
Yeah.
and directly interacting with people or communities.
Yeah.
I mean, roles like canvasser and obviously census clerk and census taker,
Right.
they're all about systematically collecting data.
Yeah.
Even a job like admissions advisor involves getting information from people,
Mm-hmm.
although the goal is different.
Right.
So it seems like a lot of the skills we've talked about, communication, attention to detail,
Right.
following procedures,
Yeah.
those are all valuable and transferable across these different fields.
So basically any job where you're gathering information directly from people.
Exactly.
Okay, so let me take a final look at everything.
Okay.
We've seen from these interview questions
Right.
that the role of an enumerator is multifaceted.
For sure.
You need practical data collection techniques,
Mm-hmm.
good people skills to build trust,
Absolutely.
real focus on the details to make sure that data is accurate,
Yeah.
ability to work well on a team, a basic understanding of data management and analysis,
Right.
and a strong commitment to handling that information ethically and securely.
I mean, it's the whole package.
Yeah, it really is.
You got to have it all.
It's a job that's all about working with data and working with people.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So for you, the listener, who wanted a clearer picture of what an enumerator does,
Yeah,
hopefully this deep dive has given you that.
I think so.
We've really tried to give you a practical understanding of the responsibilities.
The skills you need to succeed.
Yeah. And this brings up another interesting point.
Okay.
Since the enumerator role relies so much on both careful data handling
Yeah.
and good interaction with people,
Right.
what other professions that might seem totally different
Mm-hmm.
could actually benefit from those same skills?
That's a really good question.
It's worth thinking about, where else could this combination of detail-oriented work
Yeah.
and people skills lead to some really valuable contributions?
Yeah, that's something for our listeners to think about.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See you then.